Hey y'all, we're going to look at the second exemplar IA over here. So this is Rexel, I believe, a French company that has offices in Australia, and it's should they expand or not. So it's kind of a very binary: should they do this, should they not do this, which is a good tactical question to ask for your IA. So again, same three parts: the original IA, my brief annotations on the IA, and then the information from the IB examiner on how they graded it here. So we're going to take a look at the annotations briefly. So the layout of this I like a lot. If you're able, the logo of the company that you're investigating or collaborating with can go on the first page. This IA is addressed to the company that they did the research on, and this should be the same practice for you. To that company, this is their RQ question, the author's name, session, their subject, and then the word count for the various parts of their IA. So the abstract, you're not required to include the word count, but it's a good practice to do so. Research proposal, you definitely need a word count, has to be less than 500, 500 or less. And then the body, the actual IA, needs to be 2000 or less. So in this case, 1944. So moving on, the acknowledgements page, again, thanking Rexel, the company in question, for their cooperation, their help, and all of that. Always a nice thing to do. Contents page, the research proposal. Again, this is the piece of work you'll be working on over the summer and hopefully turning in August. And you'll notice that it follows much the same format as many of the others. So research question, rationale, the theoretical framework, methodology, anticipated difficulties, and then they have their action plan. So when they'll do it and what they'll do over the course of their IA. So the abstracts, again, this is the executive summary, the summary of what their IA is about. Word count you don't need to include technically, but it's good practice to include. Introduction. Personally, I like the formatting of this IA more than the other example. You'll notice that it gives some information on Rexel and what they are, how they play in the space that they're in. You'll notice the use of in-text citations to refer to appendices where there's additional information. And you'll notice that non-appendice-based information or citations get footnoted here. So in this case, they're referencing the textbook that they used in class. So it gets into procedure and method. This right here is a good example of critical thinking. Another example of critical thinking, which is one of the criteria, criterion I. Get into some of the assumptions and what they're doing. Main results and findings. So again, they don't give all the data, they give the summary of the data that they collected through interviews and surveys and techniques of that nature. So they also include a SWOT. This is a better layout for the SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, laid out in this format. So this is much better than the scrapbook SWOT, just from an appearance standpoint. And I also like how this IA presents the data, the summary of the data, in a chart form typically, and then they present their analysis of the data immediately following. So it's very easy to look for the reader to look back up at the data and then go back to the analysis and go back and forth as they need to, instead of needing to scroll through a long document. Secondary research, what they got from parties outside of the company. Their force field analysis. And then they get into the Ansoff matrix. In this case, the IB examiner took off 1 mark because he or she felt that they did not go in depth enough with the use of the Ansoff matrix or other tools. So again, each figure is labeled. Figure 5, current Rexel financials. In this case, they were able to get financial information. They presented the financial information. They presented a decision tree to illustrate whether or not the company should consider doing these warehouses. And then they get into conclusions and recommendations. So the recommendations are clearly numbered, which is helpful. 1, 2, and 3. And then the conclusion. In this case, they lost 1 mark on criterion E because the examiner didn't feel that they had substantiated enough what they had done. So providing additional detail and evidence for their conclusion would have probably gotten them the mark. You'll notice that the IB examiners can be persnickety at times, so do your best to be thorough. Then they have their bibliography, and then they get into the appendices. Again, appendices should be most of the data that you collect in the back. And again, appendices do not count towards your word count. So as always, if you have any particular questions about this IA, please do not hesitate to contact me. I am happy to help you understand these exemplars.